All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Let's Discuss series co-hosted by Alumni Relations and the Alumni Advisory Board. Let's Discuss is a virtual conversation series moderated by members of the Yale School of Management alumni community for SOM alumni. These conversations bring together SOM alumni from various regions, industries, classes to discuss a wide array of topics of interest to the alumni community. My name is Sanji Silva. I'm from the Executive MBA class of 2020, and I'm honored to be moderating this panel today on navigating new career paths. The alumni experts joining our panel today are Adam Perlaky and Kazi Hassan. Together, we'll dive into how Adam and Kazi have successfully navigated pivots and any adversities in their careers, and how they find balance or harmony in work and life. Now, for some quick introductions, Adam has over 20 years of experience in various financial roles with a primary focus on trading, portfolio management, research, and strategic leadership. He currently serves as the Director of Research at ISDA. Previously, he led North American Investment World Gold Council, where he focused much of his time working with pensions, endowments, and other institutional clients on portfolio optimization and risk management, all while presenting market research in the media and at conferences. He was a managing director and head of ETF research for Market Realist, a fintech company. Before that, he was the chief strategist at Neo Albion Partners, a boutique investment brokerage firm. Adam spent over a decade as a hedge fund portfolio manager and trader with a focus on derivatives and volatility strategies across various asset classes. He holds a bachelor's degree with distinctive honors in economics and psychology from Pomona College and an MBA from the Yale School of Management with a concentration in asset management. Adam lives in Stamford, Connecticut, and enjoys coaching youth hockey, playing various sports, hiking, gardening, fixing and building things, and spending time with his 3 kids. Now, Kazi. Kazi moved to the US in 2018 to pursue his full-time MBA at Yale SOM and graduated in 2020. Before his MBA, he spent 8 years at Unilever in South Asia after college, where he held various roles. Upon completing his MBA, Kazi pivoted to the tech industry, where he gained experience in business strategy and operations roles. Kazi left Remitly, a fintech company, to join Microsoft in January 2024 as a senior business planner. A tough transition in his experience, given the volatility in the tech industry within the recent years. From Bangladesh, and he currently lives in Seattle. He intends to remain in the tech industry and continues to live in Seattle in the future. And if you're wondering, I am right now located in Sri Lanka, which is my home country. So let's start with some questions to both our panelists. Adam and Kazi, can each of you briefly share a pivotal moment in your career journey where you faced significant adversity or change? Kazi, perhaps you can kick us off as you made an impressive pivot to a role at Microsoft recently amidst the mass tech layoffs that have plagued the industry for these past 2 years.
Thank you, Sanji. You asked us to describe a pivotal moment, and I think I can think of last year, 2023, when I was at Remitly. So Remitly does remittances all over the world. We are in the fintech space, but last year we had to go through some restructuring as well. My role was not at risk still, but then I could see the vast majority of my team either leaving or being asked to leave. So I could see that that decision would trickle down onto me. And this happened around the middle of last year, and we were given the advice, or we were given the recommendation that things could go wrong. That's how they were being polite with us, or that's how they were giving us a heads up that we're giving you a few more months for you to decide, and these few more months have been given to you because the tech industry is so bad right now. So with those 2 or 3 months, I had the really tough decision to make, as in the tough decision was my time at Remitly is coming to an end or will likely come to an end, but I can't survive on that if or may or but that could happen. I could not bank on that that probabilistic language, mostly because I am an international student and I'm on an H-1B. So whatever decision I had to make really fast. For those of you in the call who are not fully aware, people who are on H-1B have 60 days to look for their next work. If they can't find their next work within 60 days, their status in the US is jeopardized. So that was a very pivotal moment. That was a very troublesome moment as well. I really did not think that I would have to face such an adversity. I always think that, oh, it happened to other people. Probably it's not going to happen to me, but it happened really fast. Everything happened really fast. I saw my manager leave the company. He didn't announce. He left in a matter of 7 days. I saw my colleagues leave in a matter of 6 or 7 days, who all fell victims, if I may, to the restructuring process. So that was a very difficult time for me. I had to make a whole spreadsheet about all the companies that hire H-1Bs. I had to start reaching out to people in my Yale network, outside of my Yale network. That's how I dealt with it. Um, After a 2 or 3 month job process, while I was still at my previous company remotely, I did manage to find some offers. One of them not so good. The other two were offers that I was very happy with. But that said, if things didn't work out, the one offer that was not so good, I would have easily pursued that if things hadn't worked out. So that's something that I had to navigate for 3 months in last year, while the tech market was going through a pretty bad time still.
Yeah, that sounds intense, Kazi. I was also on H-1B at one point and remember the stresses. So kudos to you for navigating that and coming out with it with an extremely opportunity. Adam, what about you?
Thanks, Sanji, and thanks for having me. In 2013, I was in Chicago, near most of my family in the Midwest. At the time, I had just had twins who were less than 1 years of age. My wife had left her career to stay at home with the kids, and I had just left a successful job as a portfolio manager at a hedge. So I was kind of aware that the economic cycle we were in at the time would make it incredibly difficult to find a similar job, particularly in Chicago. So there I was in Chicago with my family of four, whom I effectively was solely responsible for financially, and had to make a decision as to the next steps. I could wait it out in Chicago, burn through cash as I looked through opportunities, which I actually did do ineffectively for a brief time, or I could take a role that was different from what I had historically done to obviously get the income. So what ultimately ended up happening was I was able to transition to a chief strategist role, where I more or less started a research product within a broker dealer, building out content around the types of trades and investments that I had been doing as a portfolio manager. We moved back to Connecticut. My wife's fund asked her back and she returned, and we've been to Connecticut ever since. But I've not been in that type of role since. And in fact, I've been in research related roles for the better part of my career since. Now, do I regret taking that path? No. Would I have taken that path if didn't have kids? Maybe not, but I do definitely believe things happen for a reason. It was at that point where I think uh, not only did I have a career pivot, but I actually had a priority pivot. For 10 years, I had more or less chased the proverbial career carrot. But, I guess my palate had grown. So I began to, ask questions of myself. I was reminded of this Subway advertisement. I remember, and I don't mean the food place, but actual New York City Subway. I had seen an advertisement my first year out of college, riding down to Wall Street, and it said, how many people has your spreadsheet helped today? And that's kind of something that ultimately has kind of resonated with me. So, at that point and over the last, 10 plus years, I began to fill my plate with other foods. Family became my main course, my outlets and non-work passions, filled out my sides. And, I kind of had a well-balanced meal at that point. So, the only thing I would say is that I think this is sort of a ever evolving palette that continues to evolve, especially as you enter different phases of your life.
So well put, Adam. And I'm about to kind of pivot here as well to focus on family after 15 years of working. So it's great to hear you say that. Adam, what personal qualities or resources did you find most valuable when you navigated your career pivots? Clearly, you've done it multiple times. So,
Yeah, so I don't think I'm going to say anything earth-shattering here when it comes to how to find new positions or how to navigate. It's all about networking. They say something like 85% of jobs come from your network. To me, this doesn't mean add as many contacts as humanly possible on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn has its place and other similar sites have their place, and you might land a job out of it, particularly earlier in your career. I think it's a little bit more challenging as you progress to more senior roles. But just submitting jobs on there and trying to play the ATS and bot game has an insanely low hit ratio, at least in my experience, and I think for a lot of people that I know. And then even if you make it through the bots to a human, they say the average time a hiring manager spends looking at your resume is like 7 seconds. So you basically have 7 seconds from a human who's never met you to tell a story and show how you bring more to the table than the other hundreds of candidates that they're looking at. So, I mean, you can have a prestigious resume that reads Yale on it, but the odds are still against you. So for me, it's always been about, using your friends, use the people you've met at Yale or the professional contacts who can put you in contact with more people, where you ultimately end up with a group of people you can go to for different things. Now, also with trying to do this with your network, it's been my experience that when you ask people you already know for career related assistance, about half will immediately just fade you, though they just won't respond, or for whatever reason they'll be of no help to you. You'll get about a quarter who will kind of try to help you but probably be a little unenthusiastic about it. Maybe 15% will give you a warm lead, and then it's that last 10% who really go out of their way to help you any way they can. So, I mean, I don't think those numbers are necessarily a function of me personally. I guess it could be, but I just think it's related to people having busy lives and other priorities. But this actually creates a great opportunity for Yale Career Services as they can consider guiding people, because perhaps they can get you beyond that 50 to 75% of people to the right people. But I think the point I would say with all this is, understanding this, I think it requires you to have a little responsibility in this sort of thing. So what I mean by this is that when others ask you for help when it comes to jobs or transitioning, that sort of time, actually do it. Be the 10% of people for others. Go out of your way to do something for them. And the other thing I would say is find out and learn who the 1 in 10 person is in your network. So if there's 10 people and one of them is going to be good for you, figure that out and have that really tight network as you look to pivot.
thank you, Adam. Yeah, and I would also add, I think, networking, it's a two-way thing, right? Sometimes it's also you being open to doing something, helping someone out and making connections. And as your network expands, then you never know when some doors are going to open. Kazi, any thoughts on this question?
Definitely a very big plus one to what Adam just said. I'm not gonna add a whole lot because my answer is very similar to what Adam just mentioned. So the biggest personal quality that I found was networking. Now it may sound like a LinkedIn, for lack of a better word, shit post, but it is really what it is. Networking did what it did for me in 2023, and I'm at Microsoft right now because a friend who lives downstairs not only recommended me, but also put in a good word to the hiring manager while he referred me. I'm also gonna do two quotes. Adam, you mentioned that it's not really earth-shattering, that you're gonna talk about networking as the biggest quality that helped you land some of these roles. But to me, networking was kind of an earth-shattering, not exactly earth-shattering, but somewhat of a different way of getting job is because I'm from a different culture. I'm from South Asia. I found my work right out of undergrad just by dropping in an application. And so networking was kind of a net new for me in the sense that networking is what absolutely moves the needle here and nothing else may not. And also in 2020, right out of my MBA when I joined Amazon, I really did not have to do any networking for that. In fact, most of the two more offers that I had, I also did not really have to do networking for that. In 2020, when I applied to Amazon, an Amazon friend told me that you really don't want to network or don't need to network for a role at Amazon. 2023, while I was looking for roles again and I was talking to that same Amazon friend, the same Amazon friend mentioned that do not apply to any place without a referral because even people with referrals are not getting interviews. How do you think you're gonna get an interview with just a drop-in application? Same person at Amazon, 3 years apart, gave me two very different pieces of advice. So I think for that reason, networking is kind of an earth-shattering quality. And as you mentioned that, it's not adding the number of people on LinkedIn, but rather making valuable contacts, reaching out to 100 people, and then 15 or 10 will get back to you. That's the same thing that I did in the last 3 months. So a big +1 to what Adam just said.
Thank you, Kazi. How did you navigate the inherent challenges of job searching as an immigrant, given that many companies limit full-time roles to either permanent residents or US citizens? And did you have any backup plans to minimize the risks involved with it?
Yeah, I did. So I did have two backup plans. And how did I navigate the inherent challenges? First things first, I made a list of all the companies that hire H-1Bs, that hire immigrants, and that list contained some very large organizations such as Salesforce, such as Visa as well. The reason I specifically mentioned these two companies is because I had interviews in these two companies. And in the second round of the interview, after making it beyond the first round, I got to know that they're not going to sponsor an H-1B in that role. It was in the middle of the interview process that a massive tech company let me know that, you know what, we have internal challenges. We really can't sponsor an international right now, although that was the case in the job application. So not only, I mean, I made a list of all the companies that hire internationals. And in reality, even that list was like half as short because I got to know in the process that they're not going to hire internationals. That was one of the first things. The second thing that I did to navigate the challenge was that I had an accountability buddy, if that's what you call it. That's also an international person that I had, and they helped me find out new roles that spam me on WhatsApp saying there was Cisco's hiring in this role. I know someone Cisco. This person's hiring in this organization. I know this person who knows this person. And I thought that this is just being a burden to people and bothering people. But given the situation 2023 was like in the tech industry, I had to do all of that. So making a list of companies that hire, having an accountability buddy who have your back and who also spread their network wider as well to help me find roles. So these were two or three things that really helped me. And what was my backup plan? So my backup plan was in 2020, the offers that I had right out of MBA, I'm glad that I kept in touch with those offers. I just dropped by once a year saying hello to that hiring manager, to my internship that I did in 2019. The reason I called that a backup offer was none of that was in the tech industry. That's something Adam had mentioned in his earlier answer as well, that he had to switch industries. Uh, he had to switch industries because he felt that he wasn't getting the right kind of role. So that was one of my backup plans, and I had very good relationship with those offers. So that was one backup plan. And the second backup plan is quite a drastic one. It's to look for roles in Canada. I have family in Canada. You can pursue Canadian residence. And then a few years later, perhaps you can come back. That was a very drastic one, but I'll stick to the first one, is to maintain touch or keep in touch with all the previous offers and everyone who had a good impression of you. So these were two of my backup offers.
Incredible, Kazi. You got to do what you got to do, right? Adam, as someone with deep experience in finance, how have your skills and perspectives helped or perhaps hindered your entrepreneurial ventures?
For me, My finance experience, I would say, has actually been a major hindrance in my entrepreneurial ventures. Given that I've basically spent a career being analytical and managing risk, by nature, I'm always thinking about how to manage risk and thinking about what can go wrong in a situation. When I analyze a potential entrepreneurial endeavor, I have no problem obviously valuing the company or the situation on paper, but I always find myself getting into a loop of why something may not work and how that circles back to whether or not it's a formidable venture, which ultimately, more or less leaves me handcuffed and kind of unable to jump into the pool with both feet. This is why I have a tremendous amount of respect for entrepreneurs who have this mentality of just start doing it and ideating, which are obviously things you learn from Yale. And it's kind of ironic because I'm very much a doer in terms of making an engine run, but I think there's a difference in doing things versus being kind of a doer of the unknown. And I think, in some ways this has been kind of helpful to me to be able to understand this because it's giving me a realization of a few things, that perhaps my makeup is more of like a COO versus a CEO. Both are obviously very important, and there's obviously some overlap, particularly in smaller businesses. But I do think there's a difference when it comes to a larger business. And second, thinking about like another Yale class as it relates to, creating boards and the importance of having different types of people on the board. Um, it's not that I'm always a glass is half empty kind of person, although my fellow classmates who are on this call may beg to differ. But I definitely satisfy the role of skeptic or risk manager. So thinking about pitfalls, questioning the other sides, being a contrarian, providing balance and caution. So, if anyone out there is looking to fill a board seat with someone who's always willing to take the opposite side of an argument or push back against the majority, I am definitely your person.
Thank you, Adam. Last question before we open it up to the audience. Looking ahead for either of you, Adam or Kazi, what are some challenges and opportunities you anticipate in your respective fields, and how do you plan to address them? Kazi, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge still in my industry, in the tech industry, remains job security. We still don't know what might happen. I really don't think we're out of the problem that we were facing in 2023, and there are still layoffs happening in many places. There was one in AWS and Amazon a few weeks back. There was one in Google. There was one in Wayfair earlier in the year. So that is still a big challenge, especially for an international. I still don't know how to navigate that. Well, I do know how to navigate that, but I still don't know how to brace that and when that might happen. That's what I meant. And how would I navigate that in future is the same way I navigated 2023. I kept in touch with all the offers that I got in 2023 as well, whether I liked that offer or not. I kept in touch with all the offers that I got in 2020, and some of the backup plans are still there. I'm still considering what might happen if I move to Canada. I still keep that option open. And some of the opportunities that I anticipate in my respective field is that um, there are some fields that will continue to hire within the tech industry, and I found that business planning is one. So if anyone in this call or if anyone in general is interested in learning more about business planning, I think you might want to plan ahead. That's what happened because when I started dropping my resume at Microsoft to the point that I got the offer, there was a 3 month gap. So I think you do have to plan ahead. So there are roles that will be hiring. There are functions that will be hiring, but it seems like each of these roles and each of these functions that are hiring are getting 600 to 1,200 applications the moment they open, and these are actual numbers that I've gotten from my hiring manager. So the opportunities are there, but I feel like given how bad the tech market is still, you really have to plan in advance.
Thank you, Kazi. Adam, what about you?
So in terms of finance or Wall Street, we've seen several shifts in recent years, and I really do think it's going to continue. It's always going to be a relationship business to a degree, but like a lot of industries, many of the roles are especially those that can become quasi-automated or fully automated are certainly going to suffer. Something that's already really happened is the trading role. The majority of these roles have effectively become execution only, meaning a value add proposition has decreased. This has kind of taken the art of trading the professional out. It's made it much more of if then, less psychology, less behavioral psychology, which is probably why, the majority of people who are trading now program. It's almost like program first, and it never was like that before. Financial research, I would say, is probably something people aren't talking about yet, but I think that area of the market's going to get hit hard. For years, you would see markets sort of have this quick oscillation when news would come out, because call it 10 years ago, you would have what I would call dumb AI. It would look for a couple keywords in, a Fed release or something like that, and then you'd see a spike. That's pretty much gone, in my opinion. We're now at a point, and I actually literally did this just because I was curious. You can go out and ask ChatGPT, for instance, because I was in the gold market for a while. You can say, why should I invest in gold? And it will definitely now get you past the 30-second elevator pitch. And it probably gets you to the point of, the 5-minute CNBC discussion or a conference that I would speak at historically. So at that point, there's no longer a need for a person to do that. And I think for a lot of people who are used to not doing deep dives, which I think sort of the younger generation who's sort of trapped in this 280 character limit mentality, it's probably going to reduce the roles in that space. However, I do think that people are doing less independent research, and you're seeing more crowded opinions because of that. So, this definitely creates momentum in both sides of the market, again, because you get this sort of crowd behavior. And in theory, that could create an opportunity for people who want to do the hard work or be a contrarian or non-standard. But I guess I then get to this existential question of, does it really matter if I'm right and everyone else is wrong and everyone else's AI is working against you? In that case, the answer really boils down to who's making the profit. In that instance, you're not, and you're kind of left with the Billy Joel conundrum, which is you may be right, I may be crazy, and if I'm losing money, I'm the lunatic you're looking for.
Fascinating. Thank you, Adam. And with that, we're ready to open up to questions from the audience. If anyone has any questions, feel free to come off mute and ask.
So thank you both, for coming on here and speaking to us and having the vulnerability that you have. When I talk to some of my peers, and I'm in the healthcare industry, and which historically, especially not for profit, has not been exposed to reductions in force and things like that. But since COVID has. And so questions come up is there anything I can do to prevent being in the target population from getting reduced? So the question for you, and being in different industries, when you look back before being in the positions, were there things that you could have done in your careers or at your organizations that would have helped, made you less targeted, or was it just a broad stroke, there was no way to escape it?
I can take that first if you want. So for me, I always come back to what I call the Icarus complex, which I think kind of applies directly to me. Be patient with your careers. I mean, you can be a savant in your respective field, but you can't teach wisdom. You can read all the things you need to in theory, but experience is completely undervalued. And the reason I say that is, I think a lot of times, when you get into corporate culture and that sort of thing, again, especially with, next generations coming up, there's this need to get everything immediately, instant gratification. And I think that can kind of come off negatively to more senior people who are within an organization, even if you have the capacity to do that. So I would say that, and the other thing too, again, nothing new, and I'm kind of at fault with this still at this point. Sometimes you just got to play the game with people. And this is going to be different at every company and that sort of thing. But, doing the little things just to ensure that, people recognize your value and, that you're being social with people and, kind of staying ahead of the curve in terms of how things are going. So that would kind of be my response.
Unfortunately, in my case, some of the layoffs that have happened to my peers, not to me, because I managed to move out before something like that happened. But if I look at my peers, unfortunately for them, it was just impossible or very difficult to evade. The reason is, if I use Amazon lingo here, a friend of mine who's L6, level 6, his organization starting from L10, who's a VP, got laid off. So it was just beyond his control or beyond his level. And even his VP was locked out of his laptop the day he was laid off, or the day she was laid off, the day they were laid off. So it was very hard. The way I tried to evade my situation is just to plan in advance. And now that I'm at Microsoft, I still try to think that it could happen to me 6 months from now or 12 months from now, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing, keeping in touch with the older offers, keeping plan Bs, keeping in touch with outside of the industry, because some of the things that have happened in the larger tech organizations are just beyond my level and beyond my control as well. That is the unfortunate bit here, and that is the part that is completely outside of my control. But then I can influence what I can influence, and I'm keeping my plan Bs alive every single day.
I would just add to that quickly, in terms of planning ahead. I would add, unfortunately, that as you become more senior and more experienced, that the amount of time you're going to be out of work, if you don't have work, is going to increase. If I were going to turn it into math, I would take your age, drop the 0, multiply it by 2, and that's the minimum amount of time you're going to be out of work in terms of months. So if you're 40, 8 months. And assume that that's the case and plan accordingly with your finances.
Thanks for that question, Matt. Anyone else?
I just want to say thank you for giving some insight on the H-1B experience, because I think that's something that is missing a lot of the times. And I think it's still helpful for people who, even if you don't have an H-1B, it's another obstacle, and it's how do you overcome that obstacle. So thank you for that. One of the things that I'm struggling with, I'm class of 21. I've been in the same job since I graduated for 3 years now. I am an H-1B holder, and for various reasons, my experience over the last 3 years hasn't been the greatest. I'm definitely experiencing a confidence issue, and I don't really feel like I've learned new things, and the things that I used to know are kind of like not as strong as they used to be. I used to have decent technical skills. In an ideal world, the way I would handle this is I would be freelancing, I would be taking on part-time roles, like things to boost my confidence and like make it clear that I know something. But as an H-1B holder, it's a little bit more tricky. And so I'm curious if anyone has any advice, Kazi or even Sanji. I think you also mentioned that you have an H-1B experience. Like, you guys have any advice for me?
I can think of 2 of my friends who did very different things while on an H-1B. The second friend was a very drastic measure. We'll get to it. That's not a solution for everyone. TLDR, he got married. The first solution, the first solution for an H-1B is that, and this is something I learned recently, that apparently you can move out of your H-1B to a different status and come back to H-1B. So here's what two of my friends within that, who I'll tell you what they did. The first one, they moved to a PhD program, and this is 100% legit and a recognized program. This is not some backdoor funny thing that people are doing that they could get caught in. No, this is purely legit. They got into a PhD, a doctorate program, and they moved to a different visa status, and then they got an offer. I believe they got an offer at Meta, and then Meta processed their paperwork. It just took like 4 weeks longer than it usually would. And then they moved back to H-1B. So they explained to me that, and this is also a Yale friend, by the way. They explained to me that you can move out of H-1B and then move back to an H-1B. And in the interim period, they were doing a PhD program. The second friend did something similar, but moved to a tourist visa. And that is also purely legit because their paperwork is being sent to an embassy that's evaluating whether they would get a tourist visa. I believe it was a tourist visa, but it was a different class. That's all I mean. They did that. That visa takes some time, which buys you some additional time beyond the 60-day period. And then after they did that for the 3 or 4 months, they found work, and then they just moved back to their H-1B. So the reason I mentioned these two examples is because I did not know that you can move in and out of your H-1Bs. That's one. And the third friend did the same thing, but he moved to a spouse visa. So that's a rather drastic measure. His wife happened to be an H-1B holder as well. Not a lot of us have that luxury. So that's a rather drastic measure. So that's something we did to navigate. That's something that my friends, the two friends that I mentioned, did to navigate their challenges.
Yeah, and I'll add that both my husband and I were also, H-1B holders, and I didn't know this, but he worked for UNC, which is a university, and it's a public organization, so those visas are not capped. Now, it's great in that because part of the problem is even if a company is willing to give you the job, you may not be chosen for the H-1B, right? But you already have it, but it's even when it comes to the extension, etc. But so that's one thing. I mean, it might not seem like the most ideal. You may not necessarily want to work for a public organization, but it's an option, and it's an easier path as far as kind of getting that H-1B. And the second thing I'll mention is don't give up. This is taking me back to 2010 when I was also on F1, and it just is extremely frustrating. Like Kazi said before, even companies who claim that they will hire interns or full-time hires with an international background, it's kind of like I see all my peers getting jobs, even though kind of academically or kind of just looking at kind of the paper work, you may be performing better, but you don't give up. You never know when it's going to work out, and unfortunately, it's a bit of a numbers game too. And what both Adam and Kazi said is true in terms of, I mean, I've been hiring quite a bit these past few years, and we get hundreds of resumes, right? And I'm at a startup right now, and so there's no HR reading through these things, and it's a matter of like I literally, I don't even spend seconds. Sometimes I have to like filter it down, but take the extra step. Like somebody who sends me an actual LinkedIn message or connects through somebody else, I'm going to take the time to review because they didn't just submit the application. And also what I will say is tap into the networks, right? And this, again, I'm echoing what Adam and Kazi said, but personally, I have something where I'm like, I mean, you get a lot of inbound messages from all kinds of folks. But if it is somebody who went to either Yale or my undergraduate college, Meredith College, I always make the time, right? So it's kind of those specific networks that you might be part of. You never know. So feel free to reach out and send that cold message out, or get through from a friend to another, look at kind of common connections, etc. And yeah, don't give up. And the last thing I'll mention is, I mean, I don't know where you're from, but you are a citizen somewhere, and it's become very global these days, right? So perhaps you can still do some of the freelance work, but you're doing it kind of based out of your home country, right? And there's ways to do it, right, without kind of obviously you don't want to kind of cross any lines with the visa, so to say, but sometimes you'd be surprised. So like in Sri Lanka right now, there's something called a digital nomad visa. We're trying to figure some of that out because we're trying to kind of come back here. But of course, we want to protect the US citizenship and do things right, etc. So.
Yeah, I was smiling earlier because Kazi mentioned Canada. I'm Canadian, so it is a little bit easier. We have some leeway on things, but yeah, it's always a challenge. So
Yeah.
thank
All
you.
right. Anyone else?
Hi, this is Stuart Charmy. Really enjoyed this. This was really, really fantastic. And I just had a quick question for the speakers, I guess. You talked about networking and you talked about LinkedIn a little bit and different things, but I'm wondering just your experiences with executive recruiters, if you found them helpful, not helpful, waste of time, fantastic to work with. Just your thoughts.
First of all, are there any executive recruiters on this call? I'm gonna assume no. Uh, Executive recruiters primarily work for the company who's hiring. So never forget that. They they will help you if they think they can place you with one of their jobs, their mandate for a given time. If they don't think they're gonna place you or the job is gone, they will ghost you like immediately. So I would say never forget that they're playing for the not playing for the other team, but they are, you know, they're only going to help you if it does them does an advantage. Now there are other things out there like people who can help you tell your story properly through your resume or cover letters, for instance. I've actually recently used something like that I thought was very helpful. Um, some people can use like a career coach or something to that effect, which I think can also be helpful to people, especially if they're kind of still trying to figure out what they want to be when they grow up, which I'm still doing, above the age of 40. But that would be my thoughts on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I haven't necessarily landed a job, Stuart, with an executive hire, so to say. But what I would say is it is nice sometimes because it cuts down the amount of time if you're on the other end. If you're being approached, it seems like they've actually as an executive recruiter, they've done the work, and because otherwise you can end up wasting a lot of time, so to say. So that's just been my experience.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Right. Any other questions from the audience?
Adam, you talked about your kind of thought process around you used to think you wanted to be CEO and now you want to be COO. We've talked a lot about forced transition, but that's really interesting to me. Tell us about what the thought process was and what the things that you did to reflect on that for some of us older people that are maybe thinking about a pivot for a positive reason and because maybe we aren't in the right spot. What are some of the things that you did?
For me, it's kind of just been a process, and it kind of gets back again to just like wisdom with time. I think when you're younger and earlier on in your career, you know, priorities can be sort of, whether it's money or glory or whatever it is your drivers are. I think those are kind of end result goals versus trying to understand more about who you are as a person. And, obviously someone may, accomplish that at a younger age than someone else. But I think, taking a step back and thinking about what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy. I think those kind of push you in the direction of where you should ultimately be. And for me, it's taken time to get to that point.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question, Terry Mearsman here?
Absolutely.
Sorry, I'm getting my technology straight here. I'm older in this group probably, and my career has been pretty much in the nonprofit sector. But in terms of some of what you were just saying, Adam, and then Kazi, for what you were saying about kind of how do you establish kind of more of a secure base. I know that for a lot of the hiring we would do, and especially larger nonprofits, it was really, we often went to organizations who had great finance, legal, technical resources, and they're pretty senior positions in the nonprofit. But in some ways, those became really good relationships, and it might be competitive in a different way than just trying to go forward, in a maybe more traditional for-profit career, kind of moving up a ladder, but kind of diversifying and being different, and actually having perhaps more responsibility depending on what your interests are in a different sector. There's both the network can also, can be clients that you've worked with and it can also be just the whole nonprofit space. And I think there's sometimes quite a gap between the understanding of what the needs in nonprofits are and how available, and nothing's secure these days, right? But at least you're kind of in a different pond. You're more unique and your skills are more called upon, and sometimes there's broader experience. And I just wonder if any of you have thought about that, or do you consider that part of your networking as you're thinking about next steps and kind of keeping your eyes out for some of those broader ideas beyond the focus initiatives?
I can go. I definitely have. The answer is I definitely have, especially in the fintech space of nonprofit, because I have a background in that. So I mentioned that I'm in touch with a lot of people. So one of my close colleagues from my earlier days is now a senior manager at a fintech nonprofit organization, and that organization only hires U.S. citizens or U.S. residents. Regardless of that, I am in touch with that person just because that person's just a pleasure to be in touch with. That is the first reason. But the second is, I would help that individual and that individual would help me back as well. It's so I have my, I keep my eyes and ears open towards different industries as well that pique my interest, that intrigue my interest. And I try to be in touch with former colleagues, with friends, regardless of background, regardless of industry right now. And I take a genuine interest in some of these things as well.
I guess I have a little bit of a experience related to that. 4 or 5 years ago, I actually joined a board of the local hockey league, which has about 400 or 500 players on it. So obviously it's a nonprofit. And I did that for a few years as vice president, and I recently just took over as president. And for me, I actually think it's almost like a way to practice running a whole business. And again, it's a way to meet people with similar mindsets and similar passions and that sort of a thing. But it's kind of it's a nice way to branch out and get that positive feedback for things that you're passionate about, and kind of supplement what you may not be getting from your regular job.
Thank you all for these great questions. Anyone else from the audience? All right. In that case, I have another question for both Adam and Kazi. Can you share a piece of advice you wish you had received early in your career transitions?
Okay, I see Adam's on mute. I'll go first. One piece of advice that I wish I had received is the importance of networking. Once again, for many of us, or for most of us, it may seem like it's just the same advice over and over again. We know the importance of networking. Yale taught us that. We did that at Yale, but I am coming from a different culture, so it is not it is something a bit of a new for me, and that is something I wish someone had told me, that you have to maintain that over the course of your career and life. It's just a coincidence, and I am very lucky that I'm a social person who just happened to maintain so many relationships over the last 6 years. So I got very fortunate in that manner, but I've seen the flip side of it as well. I've had many class of 2023 people reach out to me, because class of 2023 was particularly impacted by the tech industry disruption. And I've seen many people who've reached out to me and my friends in a manner that make us want to help them right away. And then quoting one particular example, I love passing on that favor, and I love helping people out just because I do, not because I expect something in return. I did that yesterday as well. But quoting one example, when someone reached out to me on LinkedIn, no introduction, here's my resume, refer me to this role that I found in your organization. No please, no nothing, no highs. I did that. I still referred that person, but it didn't feel very wholesome to me. So I think nailing down that networking bit to the point that it feels like a social interaction, rather than I'm dropping by to say hi, here's something I need from you. I think drilling down that bit is very important, and it has helped me because I was inherently social. That's one bit of advice. And the other thing is, pass on that favor. If you're ever in a position to help someone out, go ahead and do that. I think many of the referrals that I got in 2023 were from friends that I have referred back in 2020 or 2021 in different roles as well. So it's this mutual understanding that we formed, that we're going to keep on referring our friends for the next few years or the next few decades, if possible. So to be able to break that barrier and form that informal relationship has also been really good for me. So if you're in a position to pass that favor, please go ahead and do it.
For me, I kind of touched on it in terms of being patient, and that, wisdom comes with time. That would be the first thing. The other thing that I would say is surround yourself with people who have different perspectives. And I feel like that gets used too much in today's world. But it really does. Having people who work in different industries or fields or come from different backgrounds really do provide a different perspective on things. And ultimately, whether or not it's, you trying to develop yourself individually or start a business or progress in your career, it's good to have different perspectives. And then the final thing I would say, which I know sounds a little cheesy, do things that make you happy. Don't do things just because you're good at them. Don't do things just because, they make a lot of money. Making money is great, but, you can look back and realize that, was it really worth it? And people also say, if you focus on things that make you happy, you'll have passion for it. You'll do really well with it, and you'll end up making money anyway.
Great answers. And I'll just add one thing on my end. I was also an international student, and to me, it's take the risks, especially early in the career. I personally was very risk averse and was at large companies. And of course, I was on H-1B. Sometimes I was limited, but even after getting what I call the freedom card, the green card, I still was at Oracle for too long, right? And having been at a startup, I was the 4th employee when I joined 4 years ago. I've learned more in the last 4 years than I did in my entire career spanning 15 years so far. So take the risk early on because you learn so much from sometimes a job that might be scary and you're so concerned about kind of the finances maybe of, will the company last, etc. But you figure things out. So if there are no other questions, I think we'll wrap it up here. Thank you, everyone, for joining and engaging with some great questions. Adam and Kazi, thank you for taking the time. And it was great to see some classmates, too, from the class of 2020. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.